Welcome to WunderGraph AMA. I'm joined today with my co-founder Jens, and you guys all know him, Dax Raad from SST. What's up, Dax? How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Doing well, can't complain. And for the comments, yes, Wonderweight, we are running a little bit late. And if you guys hear any background noises, that is Zuko. Do you have Can you
All right,
switch to
I
the
just I
Zuko
just took
cam?
away his toy. Like right when the recording started, Liz dropped him off in here and then gave him a squeaky toy, which is like the opposite of what I needed.
Can you
Okay.
switch to the Zuko cam on here?
Uh actually, let's do it. I think I can do it. Let me
For
see.
those of you guys from WonderGraph that don't know, Zuko is a beast of a dog. Like you guys saw my dog last stream. There's no way I could even pick up Zuko. Jeez.
Yeah, give me a second. Internal Zuko. Oh shit.
That is true. Dax Raad from AWS. We actually have a funny question that someone in the community asked about that. So
Dax, do you work for AWS?
There you go, Zuko Cam. He's mad that I took his toy away. He's got a whole bucket of toys there, so.
we were talking about this though. You said that he's not scary. If I saw him in the dark, I think I would lose myself a little bit.
No, I don't find him scary, but I find other Dobermans scary, so I totally understand. Like when I see another Doberman, I'm like really terrified because I like know how big he is, and like if they want to do, they can definitely do whatever they want.
At any
But he's
point, they
super
could
friendly.
decide. This is true. Can verify. Okay, cool. So today, regarding the topic for AMA, we're just going to be kind of chill. We're going to be asking Dax some questions about AWS, kind of Dax's history, how he got into becoming a DevRel for SST. I know that's kind of an
For
ongoing joke that we have.
AWS?
And for AWS. But yeah, so ask your questions in the stream. We'll just be asking Dax. But the first one,
Dax, why do you do free marketing for AWS?
Oh, it's not free. I'm here to make money. Trust me. Everything I do, money motivated. Nothing I do is free or altruistic or selfless.
I think you can tell though, because really I have a better beard than Jens. That's actually true. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know, Dax has probably one of the coolest beards I've seen. But yeah, that's a good beard tier list. My beard's actually pretty bad, but we'll need to work on that. But to get started, other than the free marketing you do for AWS, let's start with your history. So you co-founded a couple companies. You started off as a lead developer for Parable and then a software architect for Inbox Messenger. The next two I find hard to believe, but you were a head of engineering and a director of engineering. And then you got involved with core maintainer for SST. So how did you get started into like web development? Did you study it at school or did you just, self-taught? How did it go?
No, so yeah, I'm self-taught. My family has a software consulting business, so it's kind of always around that stuff. And yeah, so I just started doing my own thing. Like as a teenager, thought I was good, wasn't actually good. It was just that everyone else in my high school was stupider than me. But then I started like doing some real stuff, and yeah, I started a company with a friend of mine from high school that we worked on that for about a year and a half, and it was like a small acquisition by another company after that. That was kind of like my entry into like really working professionally in the tech world. And since then, pretty much all of my experiences have been at extremely early stage companies where I was like the first technical person, or as a consultant. I spent several years as a consultant, helping a variety of different really early stage companies. So my entire career is pretty much has been just small companies at the beginning. Zuka, what are you doing? Then yeah, I did have that one role as director of engineering. So that was a bigger company. To me, that's like a massive company. It's the biggest company I've ever worked for. But they were just like 100 people when I joined, maybe like 150 to 200 when I left. But that was the biggest company I ever worked for. Very different. But that was like a pure 100% management role. I just managed a team, did not do anything with the code or the code base. Very interesting, very different from everything else I've done. But since then, I've kind of gone back to, again, being hands-on and kind of doing everything. What I like about early stage companies is I've always done a lot, whether that is front end, back end, infrastructure, stuff on the business side, design, marketing, whatever needs to be done, as you guys know.
Okay, Zuko.
Well, I have one
You hear
question.
that? He's like
did-
freaking out.
Did you say you started self-taught?
Yeah. So
Do you have like
I
some sort of degree or anything?
No, I didn't go to college. Like I said, I think a lot of people are self-taught. Mine's a little bit less impressive because like my dad's a software engineer. So not that he like actively taught me, but just kind of being around that was a little bit easier. And like I knew like the right entry points. Just like little things he said to me here and there, like they do kind of like make a big impact, just from someone that actually worked in the industry or works in the industry. In a lot of ways, it's like even better than my God, sorry, even better than like going to school, because like, you know, in school your professors might not necessarily even work as software engineers anymore, or maybe never did. So a little bit easy for me to be self-taught, I think.
Like it or not, sorry, Stefan, I give it back to you. But like it or not, we actually have this in common. Like I also have no CS degree or anything.
No, it's not surprising. It's like I think a lot of founders tend to have that, or I'm not surprised when I see that.
Yeah, I actually studied business psychology, but that's a different story.
How long did you like work with that degree?
No, never. Like during the bachelor's degree, I actually started my first startup, and nobody wanted to build the app, so I learned to program. That's
nice. Yeah,
that's how I got into that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think it's super interesting that so I have a CS degree, and I think in this right here, I'm probably the worst developer right here, and probably in this stream, which is funny because you're right. Like, yeah, I had a CS degree, but we didn't do any programming, we didn't do any coding, nothing with networking. It was all theory, discrete mathematics, and every single developer that I've ever worked with that's a great developer, they are always self-taught, and self-taught is the highest motivated category of devs. I totally agree with that. And so I remember you were telling me one time at dinner, so we were talking about product market fit. So at that company that you were director of engineering, you guys had product market fit, right?
Yeah.
And how does that differ from, like, how is product market fit? I remember you explained to me that just everything was on fire. Like, how was that as a director of engineering?
Yeah, it's kind of like everyone, especially if you haven't been at a company that has it, it kind of feels like, oh, do we have it? I can't tell if we have product market fit or not. Trust me, like if you are questioning whether you have it or not, you don't have it. Because when you have it, it's the situation where there's a kind of two sides to it. So on one hand, you're stressed because there's like a million people asking for your product and pulling you in a million different ways, and that's stressful. On the flip side, you can literally do no wrong. Like you can like mess up a million different ways. Your features could suck. Things could be half broken. It just doesn't matter. Like anything you do on the engineering or product side.
So you're saying Vercel has product market fit.
I'm not going to comment on that. You guys can go head to head there. I actually don't think Vercel has product market fit, to be honest, because a key thing with product market fit is your business model, your revenue model also makes sense. I think they have like the precursor to like a really good product market fit. But to me, I mean, everyone has different definitions of this, but to me, product market fit is like, you know, your business model aligns as well. And you can't help but make money, which isn't really the case they're in right now.
Very good point. And so after that, you ended up founding Iron Bay, which I think is your consulting company, but you became a core maintainer in SST. But talk to me about Bumi, because I think this is super cool. And Jens can relate. It's cool. Come on. You started a startup with your wife. Like, you guys get to talk about your startup at dinner. I'm not allowed to at dinner. So, you know, I'm kind of jealous.
You're forcing me to correct you. It's Bumi, not Bummy, obviously.
Okay.
Only more.
I just thought it was Bummy because you're kind of a bum, but it's okay. But okay, Bumi. Sorry about that. Talk to me about Bumi.
Yeah. So my wife, she is kind of brilliant at everything that you need to do for a tech company outside the engineering. So everything from operations, strategy, product, all that stuff. So she had been working at another startup that was in the healthcare space. They were building a healthcare product, and they kept having to build a bunch of tools for themselves, or like try to like find off the shelf tools, but they all were kind of inappropriate or just not modern. So her role there was to like help figure all that out internally. And she's like, every company has this problem. There should just be a product that serves this need. That was the initial idea. But of course, you know, when you're starting a company, you don't really know what it's going to be. Maybe for several years, like, you know, like your first idea is probably in the right direction. All you really know is a market you're trying to serve. So I think the last couple of years has been her and me just figuring out exactly what it is. It's still not public yet. It probably will be by the end of this year. But we have like 2 customers that we've been building with. But it's in the B2B space in like, so there's a certain type of category. It's called, I think they call it vertical SaaS. You like take a specific vertical and you build a product that serves the full needs of that type of business. The company where I was director of engineering was a similar type of company. The thing that's great and painful about these businesses is the painful part is it's really hard to get in there by doing something small. Because if you want to serve the full operations of a business, like one feature that checks one box isn't enough. You really have to understand their whole business and build a tool that like can run their whole business. But the flip side is once you've invested in doing that, it's just going to be so easy. Like once you can fully run someone's business and you are the only modern option, everyone just starts switching over and it kind of takes life on its own. Boulevard, the company that I was saying had product market fit, exact same thing. They focus on the salon industry. They were like, we're just going to build a modern tool for running the full operations of a salon, everything from the back office to the customer facing side. And it took them like 3 years before they really had many customers. But the moment they had like feature parity with the incumbents, like it was the obvious thing everyone was switching to. It's either you were already switched or like you were going to switch when you had time to like kind of redo some of your stuff. So yeah, vertical SaaS businesses are interesting. I think they are like a very approachable thing to build. Your customer can kind of clearly articulate what they want, what they need. You just have to spend time learning how a certain business operates. And of course, if you have background in understanding a certain field, you know, it makes it easier for you to build something there.
Okay, cool. And so I think we can answer these questions for both of you guys. So question to Dax, and then we'll go to Jens. Give us some tips on starting a business. So you've been a founder for a while. You've started your own consulting company. You're doing Bumi. Sorry about that. Bumi, SST. So what are some tips that you have for people trying to get into like founding a company?
Yeah, if it's your first time founding, the only thing that really matters is that you can allocate a lot of time to it. I think so that you either fall into 2 categories. You're either incredibly young and you can like live with your parents, or you have like very low overhead of your life. And that's like a good way to be like, okay, I can like, you know, potentially spend full time on this, or I have like an easy part-time job that pays the bills, whatever it is. You want to make sure you can get in a situation where you can kind of commit time to it. Or the other side is you have saved up a bunch, or like you're in a situation where you can kind of you know, just allocate time because you can take a break from your work, whatever it is. So if you can do that, I think everyone should at least try, because those opportunities, the timing of your life where that shows up doesn't happen all the time. So if you have the opportunity to do that, you should do it. You don't have to prepare. Everyone always talks about like, oh, first I need experience of being at a big company, then a small company, then I can start. It doesn't matter. Like the only way to learn how to run a business is to found a business. So stop preparing, stop like reading books. Like those are stuff that you can do as you are building a company. If it's something you want to do, you should just do it. So that's my main tip. The second thing is just really be open to the idea that you don't know what your business is going to be, especially in tech. Several years in, I think, whatever your first idea is, it's going to change a lot the moment you have customers. It's really funny. Like this has happened so many times in my life where I'll be working on a product and there'll be like a potential feature, like, oh, this is a cool feature that I think could be cool, but I don't like care that much about, so we're not going to build it. And then the moment a user shows any amount of interest in it, it becomes like the thing that I'm obsessed with. So yeah. Having users like tell you stuff just changes your whole perspective on stuff. The thing that you thought was the most important will suddenly go overnight to being the least important. So getting stuff out there and like it's going to change a lot as you grow.
Very good tips. And then Jens, I'd love to ask you the same question. So what are some tips you have? And while I share that, I'd like to share this image of Jens with his first startup. And so like Jens, he likes to keep startups in his family. So the first one is with his wife right there. So Jens, give us some tips about starting a company.
That's hard. That's a hard one. But
you can also
what
just
I like
copy what Dax said, but
what I like about Dax's approach is just get into it. You will definitely fail. It's just something at the beginning you're like, no, we're better, and then you're not better. So just do it. I really like the don't read the books stuff. Like just build the startup. And regarding the features, this is the thing. Like I really love to talk to technical founders and meet them and somehow help them. And you can actually judge a technical founder in the first minute, because you meet a technical founder and you're like, hey, what do you do for a startup? And the people who are really, really bad, they will talk about, oh, we have this super nice product and we have these features and we do this and we do that. And immediately, okay, they have no clue what they are doing. A really good founder is actually, and sorry to copy something from Steve Jobs, but a really good founder is actually obsessed about helping someone solve a problem, and not, I'm using Kubernetes, I'm using serverless, I don't know, I'm using SST or something. It really doesn't matter. You can just create a PHP file, but do you actually get someone, or are you actually able to solve a problem for someone? Because that's what a business is really about. And I think what most technical founders get completely wrong is they are obsessed. And I was the biggest idiot in that, like completely obsessed about tech. And I wrote this in a thread a while ago, and Dax absolutely loves my threads. And no, what did I want to say? Okay, forget it. But yeah, just solve a problem for someone. That's, I don't know.
Whereas Dax says have users, right? If you don't have users, you're not building anything. You don't have.
Yeah. So the thing is, I'm down to be obsessed with everything. Like I'm still pretty obsessed with tech, because I don't want the thing I'm working on to feel like shit like 2 years down the road, because I didn't pick the right tools, or I didn't like prepare for the number of pivots I needed to do, or like the new features or stuff that's unexpected that shows up. So I still care a lot about the tech that I use, but sometimes I just find the discussions boring, because I'm like, that is one of the 5 things that I can get really into. And yeah, the thing with being a founder is, and I honestly, this isn't just a founder thing. Like, if you want to be an incredible employee that has crazy opportunities, you just need to stop defining your role so narrowly. So many engineers just define their role as, I get requirements from product and I just kind of implement them. But just step on other people's feet and try to do their job. I honestly think that the wider you expand the scope of your role, you're just going to have so many opportunities. And the biggest truths that you're going to understand apply not just to engineering, they apply everywhere. Good principles for engineering also apply to product, also applies to other parts of your life that aren't even work related. So yeah, I think people should just widen their scope more. You can do it all, really.
Yeah.
Well
I actually got back to my thought. I think if you want to be really focused around great engineering, I would actually try and get a job in a larger company, because that gives you a lot more room to care more about engineering. Because for me, building WunderGraph, it was always, I just built an open source product, graphical Go tools. It's the engine or whatever you call that, and it was so much fun for me from an engineering point of view. And the moment I started WunderGraph, I handed everything off to my team, because I'm so busy with sales, marketing, writing blog posts, writing documentation, doing all sorts of things that have very little to do with coding. And now coding became kind of like a hobby for me, and sometimes I got time for that. But if you want to code 5 hours a day and have 3 hours of meetings, then a job might be better than founding a company.
Well said. So then now to transition into the next question. I've been seeing this a lot. I don't know if it's you guys on your Twitch stream, but people are having a tough time knowing what is SST. Like, so can you explain to us what is SST and like what problem does it solve and how did you even get involved with it? Because it seems a little bit over your head, but you know what? I don't like to point fingers. So like, what is SST, Dax?
Oh man. You know, I see what you're trying to do. I just don't think roasting is for you. I think these roasts are like too like light. You need to go, if you're gonna roast me, like go way harder. Like hit me personally, hit me a lot deeper than that.
I'm a nice guy. I can't roast you.
Yeah,
Like,
just saying you're a nice guy. Like this might not be the angle for you. It's an angle for me for sure. You can see that it just fits my personality very directly. All right, so SST is an AWS DevRel team. Yeah, it stands for some stupid thing. So what is it? Basically, there is the beast that is AWS, which is a huge company with 1,000+ products. No random person stepping into that is going to know the right way to build things. We basically look at all of AWS, try out all the different ways of doing things, and figure out here are like the good default options across the board for everything most applications need to do. And that boils down to like a very, very small sliver of AWS, like in like sub 10 services, like maybe even like sub 5 for a lot of people. So we focus on those services, figure out what sucks about using them, what questions do people have when they try to use them, and then we encode that into a framework that uses these things what we perceive as correctly, and just smooths out all rough edges around it. Anything from stuff you need in production to what the local development experience is like to what I don't know, just like debugging flows are like when stuff goes wrong in production. It's a challenging job in that we are basically tasked with improving the developer experience of a product we don't control. But there is a lot that we can do and we've been able to do on top of what AWS provides. And a lot of times this involves like going against some of their recommendations because we feel like they've optimized for the wrong thing, et cetera. So yeah, my job is really just like if you were going to build a new field service, you need to do real time. You add like real time stuff to your application. You might spend like one day researching on AWS and pick a solution. I get to spend 1 month on that, and then I will present the solution. So we basically have more time than everyone else does to understand how to use this stuff well. And we try to bake that into a framework. So that's what it is. That's the first part of your question. Second part, how did I get involved? So back when I was director of engineering, when I was not doing any coding, I obviously had a lot of free time to do like non-work related coding. And at that point, I was doing Elixir. I'd been doing Elixir for like 5 years. And the company I was at was like fully Elixir company. I just wanted to change. This wasn't a rational technical decision. I just wanted to be like, okay, I want to like do something different in a different way. And at the time, I was seeing a lot of talk about the business models that serverless enables and how these new business models like really change how you build a company. And all of it like clicked a lot with how I like to build a company in general. So it's very cool to see that this technical thing could potentially have impacts on stuff like how you price for your customers, like, you know, how you build a team, et cetera. So I was like, really, initially I saw it and I was like, this is dumb. I can already do all this. I kind of slowly got pulled in, you know, step by step. And I was okay, let me actually try to build all the stuff that I've always been building, but in this new serverless paradigm in AWS, I've kind of skirted around like doing any vendor specific things my whole career. Let me like actually dive in and commit to learning that. Very quickly, I found it was a terrible experience. Started to build some of my own tooling around it. At that point, SST has first launched like a very early, like basic launch that solved like a very specific problem that I was running into. Ended up just using it a ton, writing like a bunch in their Slack, like just digging into their code base, like diagramming out stuff that I thought could be done better. And then eventually hang on. I did that. I started contributing. Then I invested in SST. They were doing like an initial round. I was an investor. And then a month after, I ended up just joining them. And the joke I make is it was a very tax inefficient process because I gave them money and they gave it back to me and I got taxed twice in that process. So stupid in hindsight, but you know, it worked out the way it did.
Interesting.
So you spend a month that we usually take a day, so you're saying you're slow. Exactly. I go super slow. But you know what? The quality's there.
I have a
Super
couple of
cool.
questions.
Yeah.
Is it good to just focus on these serverless components, or maybe even other AWS components would also be beneficial? And why even limit yourself to AWS and not add something from, let's say, Cloudflare, or I don't know?
Yeah. So those are really good questions. We get those a lot. So the first thing is why limit ourselves to serverless stuff? We don't limit ourselves to that. We start there. So if we're trying to solve a problem, we'll try to do it in a serverless way first. And we found that the majority of situations, this is the right decision when you're in AWS. But we haven't done this yet. It's just been on our roadmap for a while. Again, it hasn't gotten prioritized because people just don't need it that often, but we are going to do it. We are adding like container support, so you can kind of spin up a container here and there where you do need something long-lived. If you're managing like something with really steady workload, or like you need long-lived connections, things like that, it does make sense to drop down into containers. It's definitely like our mindset is serverless first. When you can't make it that way, like then eject out of it. It still all will work nicely with everything, similar patterns. The second thing is why limit ourselves to AWS? We're just starting here. So there's two flavors of this. There's one flavor we're definitely not going to do. We're not going to be multi-cloud support. We're not going to give you a single interface for the concept of a function or a queue and like magically deploy that across AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. I extremely don't believe in that. I think that just gives you lowest common denominator design. You get pulled in a bunch of different directions. AWS itself has 1 million plus customers. You can build $1 billion company just focusing there for the time being, right? So it's a great place to start. The second flavor, which we are interested in, is there are great companies unbundling features of AWS that I personally have started using. So you take like PlanetScale, I'm not going to use RDS anymore because PlanetScale is a much better option for me. But you can't control that, or you can't like spin that up through SST today. Because SST is based off of AWS CDK, which is a very AWS specific thing. We are going to add Terraform support long-term under the hood, so you can spin up resources on other providers. So that might be like, okay, I want to have some functions on Cloudflare. I want to have a PlanetScale database, but I'm still using a bunch of AWS stuff as core. The reality is to do all companies, like legit large companies that are very successful, that do have fully serverless architectures, they're all on AWS today because that's the only platform that's technically complete. Cloudflare is the only one, like forget Azure or GCP, like they're not anywhere close. Cloudflare is the only one that is like providing a complete tool set, but there's still very critical things missing there for like real companies to use. But yeah, we're open to go in that direction.
Okay. And I understand correctly, your like SST, it's an open source tool, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit what is the business model or future business models, or how does SST as a company work or will work in the future?
Yeah, so the history of our company is a little funny in that, and this is the thing I was saying before, you never know what you're going to do as a company when you start it. The company first started as a CI tool for serverless framework, which is another framework. Again, everything in this space is poorly named, including SST. Serverless framework was like and it continues to be the biggest framework in terms of downloads. Like they have like, I think SST is like 4% of serverless framework. So they're like, much, much bigger. But they were like for a while, the only way to build serverless applications. So SST originally started as a product called Seed. And Seed was a CI tool for deploying serverless framework applications. So it did a bunch of stuff, like it deployed really efficiently, like only deployed changes. Once things were deployed, it automatically showed you like logs. It like monitored all your logs for errors. So you got like a Sentry like experience for exceptions out of there. So it's a really great tool for the serverless framework ecosystem. We quickly understood that the serverless framework ecosystem was failing to grow the number of people doing serverless. Like people were getting into serverless first and then choosing serverless framework. People weren't getting into serverless because of serverless framework. So we just felt like they weren't expanding the market big enough. And if we just played within the market that they had, just wasn't big enough to build like a real venture scale company. So that's why we built SST. And we shifted our focus to building our own framework that we think can grow and has been able to grow the market more. Seed continues to exist. It continues to grow as a business. We just haven't focused on it. We added like basic support for deploying SST projects. It's not like that great. That said, it still makes a good amount of money given that we have like paid no attention to it. But right now we're in the process of building our new product, which is basically pulling out some of the best features of Seed in its own standalone product that is built more for SST applications. So these are things that, and even this is all open source. Like our whole primary product that people are going to pay for is open source, so you can self-host it if you want. These are just kind of like nice to have production features. So like kind of looking across your production logs, seeing issues that pop up. There's like 1,000 little features that people in our user base is currently going to other like one-off solutions for. Over time, we'll just bake those in, and these are all going to be optional. Like you don't need to use any of this stuff, but it can be anything from like you just have like some feature flag servers you're using to do feature flags. Like we can just bake that into the SST console. Basically, we're going to build like a shitty version of every product that's out there. Because the fact that it's all in one place is what makes it good.
Fair points. Jens, anything else?
Yeah. Currently, SST is you and Jay, right?
And Frank. We got 3 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like, would it be possible for you to actually not go like a venture route and just create a great company without all this stuff, or what direction do you want to go? I don't know if you want to talk about that.
No. It's a good question. So we went through YC and we raised $1 million, like a $20 million valuation, which is already like venture scale, right? So at this point, we need to shoot for venture scale, and we definitely see a very clear path to doing that. Just like it's too much to get into details, but we definitely have a very clear shot at being a venture scale company. There's always a chance we fail and end up being a much smaller company. What's great is we are a very small team and we'll continue to be a very small team. So we're not in the situation where venture scale means like raising a ton of money, losing a bunch of money, and then hoping it works out. We're growing in a very sustainable way. With the SST console we're releasing, that'll probably bring us back to profitability. We won't have to raise. But we probably still will raise because we're pretty ambitious with what we want to do. But we're definitely shooting to be in a position of we're aiming to be a venture scale business. But when we raise money, it's because it's in a situation where we don't really have to. So again, like it's funny because this maybe seems different given what the ecosystem has been like for the past couple of years, but this is pretty much what all companies did like 5 years ago or like 10 years ago. But very normal business in a lot of ways.
Interesting. And so as you guys continue to grow, is your beard going to grow bigger with it? That's one of the questions someone asked in the comments.
Yeah, people don't realize all my talent is stored in my beard. So I'm actually trying to grow it out longer. This is like the longest it's been in a really long time. Like I can like pull this down pretty far. I got to trim it, but I don't know. Liz has been saying she's into it. So you got to do whatever the wife likes, right?
Yeah, happy wife, happy life. Okay, cool. So then we're halfway through the stream. Let's keep going because I have a bunch of questions. So does SST actually stand for anything, or did you guys just put those letters together?
Yeah, it's again goes back to you just never know what your company's going to do. So when the company was first started, Jay and Frank wrote a really long guide called the Serverless Stack Guide. And this was a full, you can like read this thing end to end, and then you would become good at doing serverless on AWS. It was at a time where like a lot of resources didn't exist, and it quickly became like really popular. So they put it at serverlessstack.com. And we it had a ton of traffic. To this day, still has a ton of traffic. So when they started their framework, they were like, well, we should probably take advantage of the fact that we have a bunch of traffic here. So they called the framework Serverless Stack. And instead of it being a guide, it was a guide plus a framework. And then eventually we shortened it to SST just because Serverless Stack was very confusing. So at this point, I like to tell people SST does not stand for anything. It still says Serverless Stack in our GitHub organization name because we haven't been able to get SST or SST dev. But I like really want to get, with like our CLI command is called SST. We got the SST NPM package. So we just rebranded to SST across the board. I want to do that thing NPM does where if every time you go to our site, it like generates a different thing. So yeah, I want to get away from thinking about it as the serverless stack, which some people think of it that way from the early days.
Okay, I love that. And then, so you work a lot with AWS, and this is, by the way, this is not a roast. This actually came from the community. And it made me laugh this morning when I was drinking coffee. So, you work with AWS, you're a DevRel for AWS. How come you're not an AWS hero? Like, why not?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly why. I do not fit the persona or like I'm sure they have like, okay, I'm going to give you my raw thoughts here. Okay.
Yes, let's go.
I have a bunch of friends that are AWS heroes and they're awesome and they're excellent at what they do. But the heroes program to me is like this weird thing. So here's the benefits of being a hero, right? If you are someone that is publicly teaching people at AWS will recognize you and make you a hero. This is a fantastic thing for you because if you are a consultant, this is a huge like just stamp of being like this person's legit, one of the top 1% of people in the world in the AWS space. AWS space is huge, brings a huge amount of revenue for you. Like it's very important. It's very like from like a personal point of view, being a hero is great. But it comes with strings in that, again, it's never explicit strings. And people always point out the explicit things being like, oh, they're technically allowed to say whatever. Like, of course, it's not explicit saying if you do X, Y, Z, we'll remove your hero status. But there is a deep association, a deep tie with AWS. AWS likes to try to hire heroes. And you can't be out there like publicly criticizing AWS incredibly directly when you are a hero, right? Okay. I have a lot of people that are heroes that have expressed stuff to me in private that they just don't feel comfortable saying in public. So it's tricky to accept that position. So even if AWS offered me a hero position, I wouldn't take it for that reason. Like it prevents me from being able to do what I do. Also, they have no interest in making me a hero because they're upset with the way that I criticize them. It's just a fact. I think for me in my role, you can't bite the hand that feeds. Exactly. Like there's weirdness that happens when you're associated to that degree. So I, of course, am pro AWS. For me, building my own stuff, I tend to try to build on AWS first. I help a lot of people build stuff on AWS. I spend all my time trying to make it easier to build on AWS. So I'm very pro helping people use AWS. For me to be effective in that role, I have to be an honest critic of saying, here's where it's great, here's where it sucks. That involves criticizing everything from the product, their organizational structure, their business practices, their incentives. It's important for me to do that. Otherwise, I'm not credible in the role that I'm trying to do. I tell people to use AWS. It needs to come from an honest place. So I think their perception of that, they are a little bit uncomfortable with, given I directly attack things that, maybe make them uncomfortable internally. AWS is a very political organization, given the size it is. Teams are very competitive with each other. When things look bad for teams externally, it creates a lot of pressure internally. SST is a direct competitor to some of their own internal products. I know it's a very tense relationship. We get no support from AWS. They don't help us in any way. Individual people and individual teams have reached out to us, and we've had some positive interactions. But as an organization, I think there's kind of a unsaid don't say SST policy at AWS, and it's just it's short-minded. I think they feel competitive with us without realizing that if we just partnered more, we could achieve the overall goal that would be good for AWS. But the issue is no one person at AWS represents the overall goal of AWS, besides the CEO. Everyone else kind of individually has their own interests, which are kind of murky when it comes to SST. And obviously none of this is big enough for the CEO of AWS to care. It hasn't gotten to that scale yet. But yeah, so at the end of the day, we have a frenemy relationship with AWS. We're good for them as a business, but not good for their individual teams.
Is there a risk that they could ban you or disallow you using AWS, or I don't know?
I hope they do that, because nothing would be better for marketing than them doing that. Right? AWS banning us because we are banning a product that people generally like just because we're competitive, that would be the worst PR move, which they would have to roll back, but in that process would really elevate us. It would be stressful, of course, but Yeah, I doubt they would do that because I think they're competent enough to understand that would just really backfire. But if they did, I think it's only good.
I have to admit, I like maybe that makes me a bad dev, but I don't know how the AWS console works. Like I couldn't use AWS at all. I guess you just need to be smarter to achieve that. But like when you make it so simple and you add so much value, isn't it so obvious they would immediately acquire you? Like, why is that not happening? Like, what are you doing wrong? Or
yeah, well, one, we've had like early conversation. I mean, serverless framework I think did try to acquire us at one point, and AWS. Like I'm sure they've like talked about it. The reality is like I said, there is like, well, one, we don't want to be acquired by them because the honest truth is any success we've had, you put the three of us inside AWS, instant zero. Like we're not going to be effective at all. The fact that we're able to be effective is purely predicated on the fact that we're outside AWS and we don't have to deal with a bunch of things that exist inside AWS, which is what prevents them from building a product like this in the first place, right? Like they just literally cannot. You need a completely different structure or organization to do something like this, which they don't have, and they try to have with Amplify, but like it doesn't really work. Yeah, it's the console, the UI console, something that no one should ever use. Like if you're going to use AWS for like a real project, it should be all controlled through infrastructure as code. The console is like a nice fail safe when you need to like go explore stuff or like a learning tool, or if you need to like poke around some things, like the console is there. So given that's the goal of the console, like I know people hate the console, but if the goal is just like to be something that you poke around with here and there, it's not the worst. The worst thing about the console is it doesn't understand like the concept of like your app. It kind of shows like your raw resources. So like trying to find, if you're thinking about things like what's a function serving like this API route, it doesn't think of things in that way. It like shows you like the list of raw functions. So the console is not just a great tool in general. But it's kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Like anyone doing serious AWS stuff is doing it through some sort of IAC tool and never really logging into the console. Yeah, exploring billing, exactly. Finding out why you got charged.
That's an interesting point. So with SST, do you guys have a UI? Is it all within the command line or with code?
Yeah, so it's we have like a kind of a shitty console that we built in like 1 month and we never really updated. The new console that we're building now is going to be like is much better, and that's the UI. And the difference here is we understand your app, so we show things in the way you think about it as opposed to the raw underlying resources. And that's it. Just doing that already has a ton of value, because just trying to find the right log in the AWS console is very hard. Whereas for us, it's going to be like kind of like a one-click thing. So yeah, we do need to expand on that, and we're going to continue to do so.
That's interesting. And I think, Jens, you can also touch on this, because with WunderGraph, we call it a pro code solution. So there's no UI, but we've been seeing a lot more people want to have a UI, a graphical interface to see like their virtual graph. So interesting. And then one of the questions that we have, this is kind of funny. So
Can I ask
has
one
a
before?
nice. Yeah, go ahead, Jens.
Just a quick one. What's your opinion on, or your expert opinion on Amplify?
Oof.
Yeah.
Like,
so
how does it suck?
Okay, so the best thing about Amplify is their product scope. If you look at the scope of what they're trying to do, like here are the components an application needs and we need to have solutions for. That is a perfect scope. And as SST, we should just look at that roadmap and just one-to-one have solutions for that. So they define the scope really well. But the challenge here is to build a great product for day-to-day developers, right? Amazon's very, very good at building infrastructure, crazy scale at crazy cheap costs that nobody can come close to. Like that is what their organization is built around doing, and they should just continue to do that. I don't think they should waste time with Amplify. They're not set up to think about day-to-day developer issues. We see a ton of people that come to SST because they're ejecting out of Amplify. There's a few issues with it, right? One, Amplify is not open source. Whenever I say something's not open source, I'm not criticizing it on a philosophical, like moral standpoint. It's actually a purely practical thing. People come to us because they have a weird situation that's maybe not, let's say maybe 5% of Amplify users might run into, because they're using some tool alongside Amplify and it's not working. Their only way to resolve that is to go open a support ticket and hope the Amplify product manager prioritizes that. Why would they ever prioritize something that only affects a small percentage of users? They have like much bigger things to be working on. So it never feels like the complete right solution for everyone, because it's like an 80% solution. Like you use it, it like kind of works, but then a bunch of stuff is broken. Whereas when it's open source, you can just contribute the fix, right? So we had Web Dev Cody, who's like a pretty big YouTuber. He like caching completely was broken on his Next.js deployment on Amplify because they were like busting the cache when a certain header was detected. I forgot the exact details. Easy fix, like tiny easy fix. We were just able to do that in SST, right? Because he was able to open the PR himself if he needed it. So the issue is it's very hard to build a platform that works with all kinds of other tools, right? Like you have to be agnostic to so much. Like the end user might be using Vite on the front, they might be using Next.js, they might be using Astro, they might be using these things combined with some other third tools. So it's very hard to build something that works for all different setups that people have when you're not open source. That's one. And then two, if the DNA of your company aren't people that are like in these communities, like interacting with these other projects and have relationships with these other projects, like you're just not going to be able to do this well. So again, that's why if you take the three of us and put us in AWS, we also would not be able to do it well. It's just they're not structured to do these like, you know, what's your day-to-day experience life type of thing. And I don't think they should. I think they should just continue to just like do the large scale stuff that nobody else do, that they're honestly kind of falling behind a little bit. Like Cloudflare is really like pushing the bar on a lot of those stuff. There's no reason AWS shouldn't be crushing Cloudflare and those things. And I think they're just kind of distracted right now.
You know what? I just want to second this open source part, because one thing I love about our approach to open source is someone in the community built an integration with Svelte. They just looked at how did we use React query, and then they just copied some files, changed it to Svelte query, and now we have a Svelte integration. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
And another thing is we had a POC phase with a hyperscaler, and one of their architects was testing our software, and he was like, "Hey, here's a bug. Oh, by the way, I opened a pull request to fix the bug." You don't have to be afraid of shipping something that's not perfect, because people who appreciate your work, they will just add something and fix it. And this is amazing, because you said earlier, you cannot, if you build like API integration software like we do, you cannot solve every edge case. But if it's open source, people can just make it work for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's I mean, the Svelte example is another one we run into a lot, right? Like none of us on the team use Next.js. So if we're going to build a solution for Next.js, how the hell are we going to do it? We don't even know how it works. So you just cannot have all the expertise in your team. And I mean, I don't know if anyone on your team uses Svelte, but you don't even know what's a correct pattern in Svelte, like what's normal in Svelte, what's weird in Svelte. Like you just need other experts to kind of contribute that. So yeah, way more companies can be open. If you're a dev tool company, like, and you're not open source, you're really missing out on a crazy advantage. It's not even, I think people think about open source like a moral thing, and it's like, yeah, there's that whole angle, but like kind of forget that. Even if you ignore that, like there's just a crazy advantage you get when you can kind of take the community's help.
You know, imagine there's like one line of code is wrong, but it's not open source. Nobody will ever know, and all they can do is open a support ticket and pray something is going to happen. And I don't know, have you ever tried opening a support ticket with Google Cloud or something? Like after a couple of days, you get an answer like, yeah, here's some docs, or I don't know.
Yeah, even us, right? Like when we open issues with AWS, we're not representing just us, we're representing like thousands of companies. Even then, it's like, it's hard to get it on their radar to prioritize. Again, it's just like, we all work at companies with tight roadmaps. We know how hard it is to like fit things together. So yeah, it's like, I think Cal.com is another company that really embraces this. You know, they fit, they kind of like did an existing product, but just as open source, and you know, they can handle all these cases that.
But they have dual license, right?
I actually don't know what their license is set up as. I think,
but this is we talked to them, but this is fine. Like they have some enterprise features, but I think that the general gist is if you build a dev tool, let people fix some stuff or add some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, and the thing is, like, people always get confused about, well, how do you make money? There's just so many. If you build something that's pretty like foundational to people's stack, which a dev tool should be, it's really not hard to come with complementary products around it. And even those products can be open source. Like, it just really isn't super hard. And as we we're talking about at the beginning, right? There's a technology that matters, but like the business model is also part of the technology, like, right? Like your innovation on the business model and have that make sense alongside technology is like one continuous thought. It's not like these two separate things.
Love that. And then we have a question from Warren. So the biggest distinction is between app and lib development. And so either both of you guys can answer that if you want to go first, Dax.
What is an app and a lib?
Like if you're building a product versus you're building a library for others to consume, I assume is what he meant. Yeah, I think I've talked about this a little bit before, and I got this from Dan Abramov, so I'm just going to keep re-quoting it. I think when I build applications, I am way, way more sensitive to keeping everything clean and manageable. Because like as we build more features, like end user facing features, we want to make sure like we're getting more productive over time, not less productive over time. But for me, when I'm building a library, those instincts were like kind of, I think when I first started doing more library work, I was realizing my balance with that was actually wrong, because when you're building a library, oftentimes making stuff simpler for the end developer means making your code shittier, like taking on more burden or doing stuff you don't want to do. And if you apply like the app mindset to building a library, you probably end up not doing a lot of those things. But with SST, I think I have it very clear in my head that making our code base clean is secondary, because our entire job is to absorb complexity for the end user. So we end up doing all kinds of weird stuff with AWS because otherwise the end user is exposed to that. So I think I care a lot less about like the structure of the code, just because libraries are like very like SST compared to WunderGraph, like the code bases probably are nothing alike because they're doing like very different things. Whereas like two user-facing applications probably like have similar structures, right? So yeah, I think libraries are very, very different from building apps.
Good answer. Jens, you want to add a follow-up to that?
So a couple of things I learned is documentation over everything else. Like, you know, I write a lot of docs and I do a lot of mindshare in blog posts and everything. That's super important for a library. Like make it easier for people to understand how it works, the concepts and everything. I think the implementation in the library is not so important. What's really important is the interface. Like, you know, our user interface is TypeScript, so that needs to be very polished. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I made, and we're currently fixing that, is so I don't like, you know, these basic principles, but one thing from the solid principle is the open for extensibility. And I was really bad at this because I couldn't see like all the things that people would want to use. You know, like at the beginning of WunderGraph, I was like, okay, someone wants OpenID Connect support. Let's build an OpenID Connect auth middleware thing. And now everybody can use OpenID Connect. Okay, that was so wrong, because what I should have actually done is build a plugin system, and someone can build an OpenID Connect plugin or a foobar, whatever auth legacy shit system you have plugin. Because now we run into the issue that people come and they are like, oh no, I have this other auth thing and it doesn't work with WunderGraph and it sucks. And yeah, now we're kind of going one step back and we are actually building like a more basic internals and an interface on top of that, so that people can really customize WunderGraph in many other directions. And I think that will give us a lot of growth actually, because then people can just say, oh, I have this weird other thing, but I can just build a little adapter or plugin and plug it into WunderGraph. And I think that will really accelerate open source even more, because then people don't have to, I want people to be able to use WunderGraph, but in other like areas, like not everybody should use it the same way. Like if you just like one little thing of what we do, then just use that. And I don't want to force people too much into my way of thinking. I mean, we're opinionated, but like, and I ended there, but we have two parts of code. So our runtime is written in Go because that's fast. And the SDK is written in TypeScript because that's great for configuration, generics, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, whenever I would want to add a new auth middleware, I would actually have to write Go, build that, release it, update our SDK to use the new Go binary, and then I can use that from TypeScript, from the SDK. So ideally, I can build something so generic in Go that everybody can just build whatever middleware they want and just write some TypeScript and fix your own stuff. And I think that was one of my biggest mistakes, creating a library.
Yeah. I mean, building in layers is very important. I think there's a temptation of like, you see the ideal solution and you want to just like jump straight to it. But oftentimes you have to build layers that you build on top of and then implement the ideal solution on top. So people that want to eject out of it or like do something different can like use the layer underneath. I think we feel that way. I think with SST, it's gotten simpler over time. Like the end interface has gotten simpler, but we only could do that once we had all the other layers underneath to build on top of. Because we just built the simple thing up front, it's very limiting, right? You can't then later go and like have escape hatches. You have to kind of do that up front. So yeah, I think a lot of dev tools, it's kind of something I criticize. And I think this will go away more and more just because the VC climate has changed. It's very easy to show crazy growth by building something that's like extremely simple up front. And that just gets a ton of adoption because like, of course, the pitch of this is so simple is like very effective. You show crazy adoption, you raise a crazy amount of money off of that. Then everyone finds out that as soon as you get into any amount of complexity, people need to eject out of it and you hit a wall with how much money you can make. So we don't want to make that mistake. That's why we start off more complex and we kind of explicitly say our code snippets are never going to be like the nicest code snippets that we can show off. It's going to be decent, but it's going to look more complicated than other stuff because we're very focused on making sure you never eject as you hit some kind of complexity.
Yeah, we actually have the same thing. Like, like to us, like, and this is something like, some people, they go like 5,000 stars overnight. And we talk to hyperscalers and they read our docs and they are like, okay, we need this. But this is not visible anywhere. It's just like real experts, they understand this, but it's not cool. Like, what we do for them, it's not cool. It is just a solution. And one other thing I wanted to say is, and I think this is something all founders have or should have in common. And it's actually a good thing. Like sometimes we talk too negative about technical debt. And also like, I'm okay with my mistakes in the past. I think it's super important for early stage founders to create technical debt to get to a certain stage. Like, had I built the plugin system on day one, we would have had a super nice plugin system and everything, but maybe even less adoption. And I think it's actually okay to fuck up some stuff and take some shortcuts and at some point fix the things and refactor.
Well said.
Yeah, exactly. Like debt is something you invest in, right? Like you invested debt somewhere. As long as you have a plan to get out of it, you can probably manage it well.
Great. And then just because we're running low on time, so we'll do a little bit, 5 minutes more. Is that all right with you, Dax?
I'm free. I can do whatever.
Yeah, but Dax doesn't work. He just streams, right? So that actually was one of my questions. But so me and Dax actually kind of fight about this a lot. Dax is anti-sales, I'm sales. And so a really good question that we had, especially with open source versus source, is how do you make money? And so Jens can talk about the way that WunderGraph does, but you can talk about the way that SST does. And they're very different approaches, which I think is super interesting because me and you fight about this all the time. So Dax, how do you guys make money or plan on making money with SST without ever talking to customers?
Yeah, so we explicitly do not have a sales team. When people reach out to us about support contracts, we decline. Well, of course, we'll take calls with them and help them where we can, but we're not trying to like monetize our time in that way. So I tweeted the other day about product-led growth. We're very committed to that concept. There is a ceiling with it, but we feel pretty confident that we should be, if we are truly a product-led growth company, we should be able to hit 10 million ARR without a sales team. At some point, it'll just make sense to have that, I think, but not till like we're like so clearly like a legitimate business. Yeah, I think for us, the way we operate our company is we have no departments or roles or responsibility, like specific roles, I guess. We all do everything. So like, everything, product design, marketing, whatever it is, we all handle it. Any time spent on sales, to me, it's like a non-leveraged business, right? Why are tech companies so valuable? It's that theoretically, if you build a product that works for one customer, you should technically be able to scale that overnight to 1,000 customers if the product is right? And different companies can do this to different degrees. Like if you think about something that's like a video game, which is like the most extreme example of this, if someone makes a video game and the video game is popular, going from 1 user to 1 million users, there's no overhead of that. You can just sell 1 million copies and you're fine, right? That's what makes it so valuable, because scaling, it's like crazy leverage, right? And of course, if the video game has multiplayer, then it's not as leveraged. You need to like scale servers as you go up. And you can imagine like a very traditional business, right? Let's say you are, I don't know, like a barber shop. To go from 1 customer to 1 million customers, you need to hire a shit ton of barbers. Like it's like completely linear. Like your workforce and your costs grow linearly with your revenue. So the reason tech businesses can be so valuable is because they can kind of hit that spectrum of going from 0 to a lot without a ton of overhead. So for us, we want to really see how far we can do that before we need to like, okay, for every $1 of revenue, we need to have like, X number of salespeople. And then we're kind of shifting back towards being a little bit more of a traditional business. So we kind of believe that you can get to a really good place before having to do that. And there's plenty of companies that have, so we're not like inventing this concept. But the type of company we want to build, we want to stay really small. And I think the magic of a lot of what we do is because we're very small and we don't have to really think about hiring or management or any of that overhead.
As you were saying that, I think we kind of agree. So like we also don't believe in having a sales team. All of our sales calls that we do are founder-led sales. Do you guys do founder-led sales, or do you guys just not take sales calls at all?
We have nothing to sell them in those sales calls, right? So like they could use Seed, but they don't need to talk to us to use it. There's nothing, like we'll occasionally get stuff that's like just like compliance questions, or like, hey, can you like limit the permissions of this stuff here or there? Like there's like some stuff like that people like bigger companies need before they can use it. But technically there is nothing you need to talk to us for the credit card limit, right? So at most bigger companies, anything under $2,000 a month, you can just do yourself. Anything above $2,000 needs approval. So if we're looking at stuff in the category of under $2,000 a month, like you can play in that space before needing to really like field sales calls to a crazy degree. Even when we will do that, it'll probably be pretty minimal. Like we really want to make it so having to talk to us is like, it feels like an exception as opposed to the default. And yeah, like we are going to have like a remote control mode where like you deploy all of our stuff into your own account. Like, so the console that we're building is going to be hosted by us. It's going to make sense for most people. We're going to have a remote control mode where you can deploy into your own account. I'm sure that's going to require some amount of conversation. But again, like we want to prove that out today. So we know that like that's a thing we can do, but we don't necessarily need that to hit like the next big phase of our company.
That's interesting. And I think Jens, if you want, you can talk a little bit about how we do sales. So ours is similar. We have, WunderGraph Cloud, that's self-service. But then for us, it gets a little bit trickier when large enterprises come to us and they want to use WunderGraph as the BFF layer. So Jens, do you want to go into details like how we do sales and how we actually do take support contracts and things like that?
So I don't want to judge SST in any way because I don't know enough about it. No, this is not going to be a negative thing. So no, don't worry. But so one of the things we sell is support or like it can go beyond support, like adding features or financing open source development. And for someone like us in the API integration space, which can be crazy complex, it is hugely beneficial to have close relationships with your users, understand exactly how they work, how they use your tool, in what kind of scenario. Because if you can find patterns and in how they use it, and you can see, like what you said before, Dax, like, okay, if this works for one super large company, this will work for others. But you cannot learn this if you don't have a close relationship or just look at dashboards or something. You need to work with them together. So like I don't want to say the wrong thing, but people paying for support, obviously we help them, but we get a lot more back than money. What we get back in this current phase of our company is really the most valuable learnings. And I think our model in this regard, it will change over time as we're adding features and stuff. I don't think they will rely so much on support, and we will have other products to sell. But in our current phase, it's just crazy valuable to directly talk to people in Slack connects and huddle together and figure out things and learn. And
yeah. I mean, so to clarify, it's not that we don't do support. If you look at our support channel, is like one of the most active of any like open source project you'll see. We are in there like talking a lot with our customers and kind of deeply understanding this stuff. A good amount of our time, like several days a week, might just go to just doing support. The key though is we're not even tempting ourselves with building a business model around charging for it. So yeah, we have very close relationships with a bunch of companies that are using us at a huge scale. Like we've like seen their code base, we can poke around there, we can kind of do all kinds of stuff like that. But we're just kind of very clear that we're not trying to like make money that way. That just is what we're doing because it's something we have to do.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thought from my side, I see this very similar with one addition. I love to take money for voting. Like, I can do everything. Like our backlog is from here to the moon. Like it's infinite length. What should I do? And I really love to take money as a voting tool because, yeah, if someone is ready to vote with the credit card, it brings value to them, and then it also brings value to others. So that's just not that it's primarily a business model, but it really helps you make decisions when money is on the table.
Yeah, it can be a good signal. I think the challenge is you can get sucked into accidentally being a consulting company for your customers. If you look at like me and Liz, our other project, we struggle with that there because we're very early. We're working very closely with a few customers who are paying, but given the stage we're at, like we could just accidentally end up just building features for them that don't really align with like our future, like what makes our company really good versus like one-off things that they need. Not saying that that's the situation you guys find in, because you probably have enough customers where you can differentiate that, but yeah, for us, oftentimes, like sometimes big companies ask for features that we just say no to. And we know that if we had the option to pay, they would just pay us to do it, but we still say no because it like, there's like a deferred gratification thing with a lot of these things. Like there's certain features that would bring money in now that don't move the needle on like really making an impact for a business. Yeah, it is a good signal, but like you still have to like, exercise your own judgment.
Great answers from both of you. All right, so we're wrapping up. Last one. So back to Magnus. This was from the previous topic. You're starting a new company. Should you focus exclusively on an MVP, or should you just build a landing page first and collect emails? So this will be rapid fire. So Dax, what's your opinion?
No, I don't think you should just build a landing page with emails. Like, that's like a very low signal, and people get too excited about that. So you might as well just start building something. Figure out how to make your MVP smaller and ship something useful. Worst case, you learn how to build stuff better, and if it fails, you walk away with that knowledge.
Okay.
Deploying a landing page, not going to get anything out of it.
And Jens, I have an idea what you're going to say.
Really? I would say focus on building a distribution channel. It doesn't really matter what you build. Just build a distribution channel, because you can leverage that in any way. And eventually you will figure out a good product. If you have a distribution channel, like 7 billion followers on Twitter, you can sell poop or whatever. And yeah.
Good answers. And then next
exactly.
question.
I don't need to submit. Like at this point, like if you have a good enough audience, you don't need that first thing. Like even if you launch a landing page, you still have to get eyeballs on the landing page. So it doesn't really solve anything for you.
Fair points. Last question. So you're starting a side project. This one's for Dax. You're starting a side project from scratch. What is the tech stack that you're using, and why is it based around WunderGraph?
Nobody even knows what WunderGraph does. So maybe we should figure that out first.
We don't know.
You're the one using it in your tech stack, so I think you should explain it.
I'm not using WunderGraph in my tech stack. I actually don't think I don't think anyone should be using WunderGraph in their tech stack. The technology aside, the company is just really cringy. I don't know if you want to expose yourself to this level of cringe on a day-to-day basis.
Look at nice polos. Look at these polos.
Polo,
we do
perfect.
cool.
Yeah, exactly.
We
right.
do
Cool
company excursions.
Company polos with a company logo on it.
Nice. Dax, you know what the problem is? Dax, one of the things is because you do this all the time, it's actually normalized. So what you just said is just like, it's like saying hi. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm just being myself. So
that's how it is. And then follow-up question. So Jens, you're starting a side project from scratch. What is the tech stack you're using, and why is it SST?
Stefan, why are you asking these questions?
It's not me. It's the community. The community asked them. Like, what am I supposed to do?
You guys are lying or making up shit. Like, come on.
Why is it SST? I don't know. I would say let's say I'm like in my mid-20s. I'm just studying or finished to study. I just want to drink the cool ad. Like, I don't care if the software is good or anything. I just want to use the hype tools from people with good beards and nice microphones, and that's people I adore, and I just want to use their shit.
Great answers from both of you. Okay, so you heard it here first. Dax uses WunderGraph and Jens uses SST. So that concludes our AMA. Thank you, Dax, again so much. I know you have a very busy day of streaming ahead and just laying on your lawn in your underwear, but I don't want to hold you to it.
I am in my underwear right now, but you are correct.
There are children watching this stream, Dax. Come on. But,
are there? Anyway. Why would there be children watching this stream?
Because I said SST was coming. It's kid friendly.
Oh, man. Okay, you finally got a good one in. Nice. Good.
Zing.
Good job.
Okay. Thank you guys again so much. We went overtime. Dax, any final words?
No, nothing from me.
Love that. Jens, anything from you?
Ciao.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
See you, everyone.
Later.